You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. It's very good to be with you. We have quite a bit to dig into, so without further ado, I always make a point to praise the Federal Bureau of Investigation and law enforcement for stopping terror attacks. We talk, obviously, and as we should, long into the evening whenever there is a horrible tragedy regarding an act of mass violence or mass fraud. But when the FBI is able to stop these acts of terror before they happen, major praise should be given. So Kash Patel reported this morning the FBI and their partners foiled another potential New Year's Eve attack from an individual allegedly inspired by ISIS. FBI Charlotte spoke about this at a press conference. There were several New Year's terror attacks that were planned, and as you now can see, we are here on the other side of New Year's, January 2nd. Thank God we did not see any repeated attacks like there were in New Orleans, the Islamic terror attack that happened on January 1st of 2024. Here is the press conference out of Charlotte talking about the arrest of this particular young man.
The defendant here is an 18-year-old named Christian Sturdivant. He has been planning this attack for about a year, but he's been planning an attack for far longer than that. He was planning this attack in support of ISIS, and we have charged him with attempting to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization.
By the way, for those out there in the larger political sphere who've said things like, well, I don't even know why anyone would have any concerns about Islamic terrorism, because I can't even think of anyone in 24 years that's been attacked by an Islamic terrorist. If you're a complete hack, then you might note that this individual was choosing in advance to, let's see, ISIS. Oh yeah, it stands for Islam. Interesting. Islamic terror attack thwarted. So again, huge praise to the FBI. We'll let them continue a little bit more on some of the details.
That organization being, of course, ISIS. Now, this is still very much an active investigation. We had to act quickly here to protect the public. So we are light on details, but we'll tell you as much as we can. And Mr. Barnacle will probably tell you more than I will about
the very first detail is what I'm waiting for here. It is extremely important.
Those charges, but I thought I would give you an overview of what's in the federal complaint and the charges that we charged. So Mr. Sturdivant started on the internet.
There it is.
He started reading ISIS material, started going to ISIS websites, making TikTok videos.
That's where it begins. This kind of action, this kind of pipeline into, whether it's radical Marxism, whether it's radical transgender ideology, whether it's radical racial ideology, or, of course, this radical Islamic terror starts by these disaffected youths finding their way onto the internet with unfettered access. Their parents don't pay attention to what their kids are looking at. Then, of course, when they become adults, this doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It's not like you turn 18 and with all of the circulations you start receiving in the mail, you also get a, hey, have you considered joining ISIS? That's not how that works. This is a decades-long grooming process, and it is rampant on the internet. And so when you hear about foreign actors who have access to your children via foreign algorithms, let's say from Beijing, and you hear all of the pearl clutching, well, the American government spies on me. Why should I care if Beijing's government has control of a social media algorithm? This is why. This kind of crap is why. And again, major praise to the FBI for stopping it. Let's talk a little bit about something that they're doing cleanup after, and we were not able to stop before it took place. Now, the Trump administration has done something excellent that should have been done several months ago. To be fair, they've had a lot going on. Kelly Loeffler of the Small Business Administration has now elaborated on President Trump's announcement to freeze all federal childcare payments across the entire country until every single state, every one of them, from California to Indiana, from North Carolina down to Texas and up to, yes, even Minnesota, must verify that there are children in the daycare centers that are receiving money, that there are patients in the medical facilities that are receiving money, that there are intended targets who qualify for the services that are being sent your money. Finally, thank God at long last. And a little special let's say, hidden blade thrown in at Minnesota itself. Here's Kelly Loeffler on the federal freeze.
out of $1.2 trillion that went out through SBA funds during COVID. Now remember, these COVID-era loans helped millions of small businesses keep millions of employees on their payroll. Most were legitimate. But the fact is we had organized crime operating around these, like we see with the Somali crime ring in Minnesota. And so we have gone back through loans that the Biden administration tried to forgive that were known to be fraudulent. That's why we already had 13,000 that we knew had been marked as fraudulent. We're able to find quickly 8,000 of those and make sure that they cannot benefit from our services. But now, as I mentioned, we're going to do that state by state. We are going to make sure, now that we understand the breadth and the depth and the method of these crimes, that we hold more states accountable. And so we are making that commitment.
And that's a good thing. It is a good thing. It is just a smidge late to the table. And we are not yet. By the way, the reason I say that we're late to the table, state legislators in Minnesota have been ringing the alarm bells on this for over 10 years. For over 10 years, state legislators have gone on TV and have begged anybody out there at all to give the flip of a wooden nickel about the fraud that has been occurring in the Minnesota Somali migrant daycare centers. Now it's too late. The money has already gone out. I mean, of course, it's good to stop these things now, but a lot of that money has already made its way to the Al-Shabaab network. The media has really no idea how to cover this at all in any way whatsoever. And yeah, part of it's funny. I mean, they're doing it's not happening and it's conservatives' fault that it is routine, that the blame for the alleged fraud in Minnesota belongs to conservatives by Lisa Needham. Yet another public outlet who has gone completely down the tubes. By the way, she blames it, for those who are listening and not watching, on privatization and a lack of oversight. Creates a vicious cycle. No, it turns out that the vicious cycle is caused by state and federal dollars given out, I believe the scientific term is willy and nilly, without any kind of oversight or accountability whatsoever. When Tim Walz goes after the legislative auditor in Minnesota, scraps a position that was created to look over the budget because they have concerns, and by the way, then filmed a video of himself going for a nice icy run today and describing the outfit he was wearing. I'm not going to force you to watch him describing his Under Armour long johns or whatever, but I guess running from your problems is good cardio. The entire idea that the Democrats can escape this going into the beginning of this year is not even remotely feasible. And it all comes down to their new cadre of individuals, the new Democrat socialist mayor of Seattle, the new openly communist mayor of New York, directly quoting Joseph Stalin. We're going to get into some of these reasons that matter, because that same fraud that happened in Minnesota, yes, we're of course exposing it in Washington state. Some of my good friends are in the process of exposing it in Ohio, many other states. But the cover-ups of the cover-ups, again, while extremely pathetic, are not over and do require your attention. So for example, you may recall that the Nokomis Daycare Center in Minneapolis, you say, I have no idea who that is. What are you talking about? The guy who said that his daycare was broken into, and before the dog ate his homework, they stole the documents that included the records on their kids and their employees.
Unfortunately, we saw that there was important documentation, enrollment of the children, and also employee documentation that was gone.
Yeah, that guy. So people have looked a little closer at some of the footage when the media came in and said, wow, look at these. They tried to bust in through the Dollar General next door and through the drywall. Wow, it's incredible. Once people zoomed in on those photos, they noticed something a little interesting. Case in point, the drywall cuts were done from the inside. When you cut through drywall, or you cut through plaster, or you cut through hardboard with some type of paper material over it, if you'll notice over here on the right side, that seam, that is a cut that was made from the inside through to the back of the wall. Because when you go the other way, it frays, the cuts split in a very jagged way. If you've ever cut plywood, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So by allowing the media to come in, by the way, now this daycare center, since this has been shown, is now no longer allowing any media to come in and film any of the damage that was done supposedly by these thieves that were going to steal the proof you committed the crime. Radio crew, we got to send you over to the commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, there, of course, just in the nature of things getting quite worse, now that states are turning over, including Minnesota, a lot of their documentation on these federal dollars that have come in, we are discovering that a lot of this fraud should have been discovered by anyone even second-handedly looking over a spreadsheet. The most basic of accountability measures would have stopped this fraud cold 8 years ago. So Amy Bach, she's one of the individuals charged and convicted in the massive Medicare and charity fraud schemes, the hundreds of millions of dollars. She is on the list of grant or she's the grantee She writes the grants and submits them to the governor. That would be her. For 40 of the Somali childcare businesses. 40. This woman essentially is the fall woman for 40 of these businesses. She wrote fraudulent grants for. Applicant. That's the word I was looking for. Now you say, well, okay, sure. That's bad. That's awful. Maybe a child should have been able to figure that out. Maybe not a child who went to the Quality Luring Center, but certainly, your average child of average intelligence should have been able to figure this one out. Well, au contraire. Because the people in Minnesota now have another exciting new program that went into effect in New Year's. Tim Walz's paid leave program, where the state gives you money for being home. Yeah. Since it opened yesterday, this program that allows people to get up to $1,400 per week and up to 20 weeks paid time off just for existing in Minnesota. And yes, illegal immigrants, Somali migrants, absolutely can apply for and receive this grant money. Excellent. Fantastic. Well, in one day, in 24 hours, there have been 12,000 applications to this just free money piggy bank in the middle of all of this fraud. Now, a state level judge, the governor's office, a federal judge, all three of those could essentially stop in and say, hang on, nope, we suspect there's fraud and that this isn't written correctly. How about no? No one's filed that motion. So while we're dealing with this one pocket of fraud, now there are new pockets of fraud being opened up. Now, I do have some good news away from the fraud for a minute, because we're going to have to get into some international news and some New York related news and some Islamic terror related news. There is some good news on the judge front. The Ninth Circuit panel in California has struck down California's ban on open carrying firearms. That's a huge thing. California, of course, passed a measure that said you are not allowed to open carry firearms because it could give some lesbian barista at Starbucks the heebies and the jeebies. So not allowed to do that. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said that's blatantly unconstitutional. How about no? Now, this is also important because this was Scott Wiener's baby, which, given his private lifestyle, probably the only chance at, a baby he's going to get. But anyway, Scott Wiener, who's running for senator in California, he also has another bill that he's very excited about that he helped to get through. This would be the ban on federal agents wearing masks in the state of California. Yeah, that violates the Supremacy Clause, also going to be struck down. So California or Minnesota or Michigan or New York, as Zohran Mamdani is about to learn, or of course, Wu's territory out in Boston, Massachusetts, you can pass whatever little ordinances and laws that you think you have. But as you push and push and push with your state legislators, and then of course the federal judges who are on the Chuck Schumer side of things, there are a lot of courts of appeals and the Supreme Court itself, who in 2026 is going to have, dare I say, an even spicier year than in 2025. Again, we are finally out of universal injunction territory, and that's a very good thing. But we are soon, by the way, this Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, there is now a legal measure that is likely to take place that will ban any open carry restrictions in any state or territory in the United States. outside of like federal jurisdictions like post offices, for example. All right, we're going to swing back in to get the radio crew. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We've got quite a show.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. President Trump had quite the busy New Year's celebration, by which I mean he got up in front of the country in the middle of some news that a lot of the media has chosen not to cover. And the President of the United States, in the middle of a major popular uprising against the mullahs regime, radical Islamic Sharia law regime in Iran, the President of the United States got up and made an announcement on Truth Social this morning. He said, quote, "If Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue." He says, "We are locked and loaded and ready to go." And then, of course, thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So this is an excellent thing. It's a very good thing for the President of the United States to do this. It makes it very clear who is in charge in the Middle East. It makes it very clear that right now the United States is not going to be pushed around, and that the mullahs regime, which is collapsing inward on itself, is probably on its very last gasp here. Now, the response from the Iranian regime, which I particularly appreciated because we've heard this one before. In fact, this really is the meme from Back to the Future where Marty McFly goes, "Hey, I've seen this one. It's a classic." The Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has stated that all American bases and forces across the Middle East will be legitimate targets in response to any intervention by the United States in the ongoing civil unrest throughout Iran. I like the source who's civil unrest. Iran is an open revolution at this point. Open revolution. There are civilian groups, not paramilitary groups, which have now armed and have taken over entire police departments in certain city centers. President's statues are being hurled down to the ground. We're going to get to that in a second. And the Iranian saber rattling plan is essentially just that. Oh, we're going to hit a base in the Middle East. And you can hear the United States Navy saying, please, please, give us an excuse after we leveled all of your SAM sites. Give us an excuse to fire just a couple, just a few cruise missiles. There are some very, very excited drone operators in the Air Force whom I have had the privilege of texting a bit with today. They are excited about the idea that the MQ-9 Reaper might throw a few after New Year's presents at the Khamenei house. We know exactly where it is. The Iranian people are tired of the women-beating, child-raping nonsense that has been the standard of the Iranian regime. Now, by the way, you'll notice that none of what I've said, none of what the president said, is a boots-on-the-ground, long government reform, we're going to teach you democracy, occupation war. Nope, none of that. The President of the United States, despite a lot of the pearl clutching, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the show, over the situation in Iran is a correct response that is essentially, hey, what if, we just, for the heck of it, we fly the B-2 bombers yet again? This has upset quite a few people. But the situation in Iran is getting more intense. The latest intelligence that we have does show civilians either having stolen certain firearms or having been given them by turncoat police and military forces. I'll talk about that in a second. Here you go. See people in the distance who are engaging in some light arms fire exchange. And then as well, you can see another clip of kind of some of the same. Now, they're doing the classic intimidation Middle Eastern style tactic of manliness, which is where you get your baggiest pair of pants and your least rust-ridden AK, whether that's the 74 smaller variant kind of a pseudo submachine gun variant for those who were asking last show, or the AK-47, the Kalashnikov, the classic, and you hold it upwards vertically in the air, and then you fire a few rounds at the International Space Station. I would conserve ammunition at this point in time, just a little bit of advice. But these are civilians. These are not paramilitary groups. You might have been able to tell by the sheer lack of discipline, although paramilitary groups in the Middle East are not known for their discipline. More importantly, though, the protests are growing larger. We're not actually seeing the mowing down of protesters. There's a video that I'm not going to show just because of how violent it is. One woman who discarded her burqa was dragged off by police. We're told that one of those police has since been found and stomped to death. I certainly hope that's the case. But there is a statue of the new Iranian president after the last one got oomphed. Here was that statue's unveiling. All right. That statue is currently on the ground. So we're just doing the old Lenin and Stalin statue throwing down situation over in Iran presently. Good stuff. Absolutely. Now, in response, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard security forces and reportedly the NOPO, the NOPO counterterrorism units, which is supposed to be a more elite counterterrorism force, have been filmed loading into ambulances in the Hamadan region, staging, as it were. Now, again, as we have said before, whenever you see counterterrorism and your more elite intelligence units loading into blind enforcement activity, whether it's busting into a building, whether it is going into an area that you do not have exclusive intelligence operational information of, you're losing. You're losing really, really badly. Putin does not have the resources right now to prop up the Iranian regime. He spent it all. He spent it all. Xi is a little bit busy in China. We've cut off the oil from Venezuela to be refined and sold to Iran. They're in a really rough situation. Now, as of right now, the current death count total is somewhere between 11 and 25. We don't know. As a reminder, the Tehran-based economy, the centralized mullah regime, is currently experiencing mass inflation. It's at 40% in December. The currency, the rial, just hit record lows. So it's quite the situation. I'll say that. Right now, I would just encourage you just to pray for those who are on the ground in Iran. Pray for the people of Persia. The people of Persia, God bless them, God be with them. And I certainly wish a very guillotine to Khomeini, which is what a lot of the people are chanting. Now, here at home in the United States, the left wing is very, very upset at this. They're very, very upset because the left wing in the United States desperately loves radical Islam. Radio crew, we're going to send you to the commercial and talk about some of this really awkward history revisionism that's horseshoeing its way on the left and the right, and the mayoral election it just won in New York. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, well, the radio crew's at commercial. Wajahat Ali has released a new influencery video suggesting that Thomas Jefferson, who started the United States Navy's oldest tradition of bombing the living out of Ottoman and Barbary pirate Islamic terror boats, that president got his idea for writing the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution from the Quran. Here you go.
To the Quran, what people don't know is Thomas Jefferson, founding father, actually bought his Quran from England, purchased it in 1965 as a law student, and he had all these different texts from different religious communities. He himself wasn't that religious, in fact, didn't really care for Islam. But reading the Quran and embracing DEI made him more open to religious tolerance and pluralism. And his Quran is now part of the Library of Congress. And his Quran, in part, and all the religious texts that he used, inspired him to write about religious liberty, which is why we have in the Constitution the Establishment Clause.
So you'll notice he says 1965. No, that's not AD. No. But alas, him making the case that, oh, well, Thomas Jefferson, he bought his Quran in England, and that's where he got all of the ideas for liberty. Thomas Jefferson had a very extensive library that included all of the available religious texts of the day. I hate to break it to you, Thomas Jefferson openly cites the King James multiple times in the Constitution, in the Declaration of Independence, in subsequent letters, in French and in English. Thomas Jefferson was not getting his ideas of religious liberty from the Quran. There are all of these weird influencers right now that are trying to make the case that Islam built the United States. No, I'm afraid not there, Chief. The United States was the only power that decided not to pay the Muslim pirates. The United States, the only power in the developing conglomerate trading kind of commonwealth of empires that did not submit to Islamic controls of certain ports. The only power. The amount of disdain that in his private writings, John Adams, Jefferson, all the way up through, goodness gracious, all the way up through Quincy Adams' administration, making it quite clear that the United States was not going to bend to the Islamic influence of Africa, of the Mediterranean, of the Middle East. Throwing all of this away and just pretending that, well, actually, Islam's a very important, peaceful, wonderful thing. And one of the comments points out, a channel member, Carol Hutch, says, Thomas Jefferson read the Quran to understand Islam better, not to imitate. Yes, absolutely. Correct. He was deeply interested in cultures because he kind of wanted to get the whole American experiment correct. You know, just kind of a little cool historical fact there for you. Now, unfortunately, this has not translated over very well to the present day, where Zohran Mamdani has sworn in on a Quran in a subway station, which was built by a private firm, by the way, one of the prettiest subway stations, the City Hall subway station in New York City, where Zohran Mamdani swore in. He swore in a privately built one, like a prettiest one, that became a rundown heap after the city bought it, but that's another tale for another time. And his very first speech after his inauguration today was a choice. It was yesterday. It was quite the choice. It was a disaster. All of these individuals who have promised you from the bottom of their hearts that Zohran's just a moderate, he's just saying friendly things. He's like Bernie Sanders. He just wants you to have your own cup of tapioca pudding of one flavor and a little bit of AOC. It's going to be great. And it turns out that Zohran is exactly who he said he was. And now New York City is going to get this good and hard. Not, designer boots like his wife wore, $630 ugly boots to his, inauguration, whatever. But we're going to get into this because, the speech matters a lot more than the inauguration itself. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
As many of you know, during the day, my day job, I'm a national correspondent for the Daily Signal, which means I go on various shows and I talk about the daily news. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of Republicans as kind of a cope over the last several months, knowing that Zohran Mamdani is going to win, is that he's not going to be able to get anything done. He's just going to sit there and he's going to say progressive things and New York is just going to always be the same. And I remember saying, guys, with every single one of these young Marxist, hyper-racial, identitarian, Nepo baby candidates, they always come in and do the most radical things that they possibly can. Again, I will remind you, in the middle of the largest fraud scheme in the country, in which universal childcare funding was provided in large state and federal block grants to Minnesotans, to people in Washington state, that the major fraud rings that came out of it, Zohran Mamdani and his universal childcare plans, in the middle of that, Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, endorsed them. In the very first day of Zohran Mamdani being in office in New York City, in the first 24 hours, he hired a lawyer to defend Al-Qaeda. I want to make that clear because maybe you didn't catch that. Zohran Mamdani, who totally claimed that, well, he was really going to focus on, governance and, the people and all this nonsense. In the first 24 hours, he hired a lawyer for the city to defend and represent Al-Qaeda as chief counsel. There you go. Excellent stuff. Also, he scrapped a lot of the protections against a lot of the anti-Semitic attacks in New York City, in which individuals of a certain cultural group have assaulted swaths of Asian and Jewish people in New York City at their, whether it's at the ATM, outside apartments. Zohran scrapped a bunch of that stuff because when it comes to Asian people and Jewish people, hey, Zohran's got a city to rewrite. But what he got the most of. Oh, yeah, Producer Daniel, sorry. I want to make that clear. He appointed the former Al-Qaeda defense lawyer is on his chief counsel. Yeah, I realized the wording got a little scrappy there. The big thing that people are upset about regarding Zohran Mamdani, like the big issue, is that he made this comment about collectivism. This is the one that has everyone talking today.
We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it. Because no matter what you eat, how you pray, or where you come from, the words that most define us are the two we all share: New Yorkers.
Uh-huh. Excellent, exciting stuff. So right off the beginning,
we will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with
replacing individualism,
the warmth of collectivism.
The warmth of collectivism. The warmth of collectivism. So right off the bat, making it very clear, he's quoting Joseph Stalin. That is a direct quote. Joseph Stalin: "The individual is nothing. The collective is everything," end quote. The warmth of collectivism. Collectivism has never provided any warmth whatsoever at any time, ever. It didn't provide any warmth in the breadlines. It didn't provide any warmth to the man in Tiananmen Square. It didn't provide any warmth to those slaughtered in China by their children. Collectivism has never provided any warmth except the fire that burns down that which came before it. But hey, there you go. Now, it's really funny watching some of the moderate Democrats, or really a lot of the older Democrats and never Trumpers, lose their minds. Because as we recall, during the election, there were a lot of never Trumpers who simply were choosing Zohran Mamdani because Trump didn't like him. One of these guys was Joe Walsh. So Joe Walsh, the used to be a Republican, then went super far to the left. He was very upset at this collectivism comment today. He said, no, this is a country founded upon rugged individualism and individual freedom. Nothing should or will replace individualism. Not here. No MAGA authoritarianism in America, and no leftist collectivism in America. Yes, all of us should help those less fortunate, but hell no to this. Big, strong stance right there. He's impressive. Only here's the thing. Joe Walsh was one of the guys who was calling for Zohran Mamdani ages and ages ago. Here's me, a Democrat for only 2 months, pretty darn conservative Democrat to boot, respectfully pushing this longtime Democrat to get with it, embrace a big tent, and support Mamdani. All of those leftists who told you openly, well, I mean, he's just a kid, he's just passionate. I mean, sure, he refuses to condemn any Islamic terror organization. Sure, he's openly said that he wants to legally target areas that are more white, whatever that means. He's suggested and promised extremely Marxist policies up to and including state-run grocery stores, which Bernie Sanders endorsed yesterday, yet again. And everyone's like shocked. Oh, I can't believe that he's just going all into that. I never believed that when he said he would govern as a democratic socialist, he's a democratic socialist.
We will deliver nothing less as we work each day to make this city belong to more of its people than it did the day before.
Awkward cheering because, again, everyone is stunned. The city that said it would never forget, it only took 24 years.
Here is what I want you to expect from the administration that this morning moved into the building behind me. We will transform the culture of City Hall from one of no to one of how.
He has yet to explain how on any of his particular policies.
We will answer to all New Yorkers, not to any billionaire or oligarch who thinks they can buy our democracy.
Unless you're Alex Soros, in which case you have his attention immediately. If you're one of the schlups who went to his block party, they had no food, no water, no plumbing, no restrooms, no nothing, no medical facilities. They had to bring in security afterward. They weren't planned in advance.
We will govern without shame and insecurity, making no apology for what we believe. I was elected as a democratic socialist, and I will govern as a democratic socialist.
And the millennials cheer, yay, that is so wonderful, except it's never worked anywhere. It's never worked. State-run nonsense doesn't work. I don't like it when anyone tries it. I didn't like it when the president of the United States threw shares into Intel. The government shouldn't be owning certain industries. I don't care for it. New York City should not do it. I don't like it. I don't care if they're left, right, center, north, or south. I don't care if they come from Israel or South Africa or Missouri. I do not care. I don't like the government owning things. It sucks. It always sucks. There is no incentive for success. This like weird altruism that the millennial generation and the Gen Zers pushed into being in New York City, where they believe that the lovely altruism of a Starbucks poetry slam is suddenly going to manifest itself by a pink crystal magic because, he's kind of he's a Cancer astrologically. So, that just means he loves people. That kind of garbage is so embarrassing that if a conservative writer would have pitched that as a novel idea 10 years ago, that a Democrat socialist would sweep into power and announce collectivism, the warmth of collectivism was going to kick aside the frigidity of individualism, that individual would have been laughed out of the publisher's room. And yet here we now are. Now, there's one little other bit of interesting drama, you might say. And I do particularly enjoy the irony. So you will recall that Elon Musk, that there were all of these articles that in his opening speech right after the inauguration, Elon had given this Nazi salute all over The Hill, Vox, Wired, AP, The Guardian, the BBC, Newsweek, CNN, the New York Times, Vanity Fair, all of this Nazi salute stuff. And I saw all of the body language super intelligentsia people come forward and say, well, because he bent his hand back during the salute, that means, and he had his hand over his chest, it's just like a Nazi salute. That's how we did it. And now I'm watching as Zohran Mamdani gives the exact same salute. So you can see he's got the arm stretched out. He's got the hand, the gloved hand pointing upward. And then he comes back and he brings it and he does a separate motion, just like Elon did. And again, here's the comparison a little bit later. I'm just, every time I see this, it cracks me up because this double standards are just full of giggles here. Let's watch it. Yep. So Elon does the awkward gesture and then a couple of other gestures. Zohran does the awkward gesture and then a couple of other gestures. Why the benefit of the doubt all of a sudden? The double standard. It's not like some serious, heavy head-breaking news, but I find it funny. Radio crew, we're going to send you over to the commercial. More news to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, to the live stream crew. More on the situation around the country. We also have the new mayor of Seattle, Katie Wilson, who jokes about being a communist. And there's awkward, silence, kind of awkward sort of laughter in the background because there are those on the stage with her who were expecting her to actually be the Seattle Chaz, autonomous zone, anarcho-communist sort of something. Here you go.
I had the honor of being noticed by the President of the United States. who called me a very, very liberal / communist mayor.
The guy is totally stoned over her shoulder, you can see.
/ communist mayor.
Like everyone's laughing, yeah.
It's nice to feel seen. That's all I'm going to say about that. And earlier this month, we launched our...
I do like that. I do like that the two styles of Democrat are still very much present with us. You have the awkward, giggling girl, whether she's, 65 or 25, who just awkwardly giggles her way around because she doesn't really have any kind of a philosophy. She's just going with wherever she's told and whatever gives her affirmation, the key jangling and attention. And then you have the guys who are like, I'm going to govern radically. And then everyone makes excuses for, oh, he's not going to govern radically. He's like, no, I am. We're going to do state-run everything and racial everything. I'm like, well, he doesn't actually mean that. And then he's in office. I campaigned as a Dem Soc. I will govern as a Dem Soc. Everyone's shocked and amazed. Wow. Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. It really does. By the way, the pearl clutching right now over some of the Democratic Party who recognizes what they have voted for and are now upset, as some columnists over it's kind of the USA Today network are, that they cast out John Fetterman too soon, that they cast out Joe Manchin too soon, that they've cast out all of these kind of more moderate Bill Clintonian Democrats too soon. And now it's too late because he's inaugurated. He's here. People have suggested that, well, he is not going to be able to give universal, bus fare because, the Metropolitan Transit Authority is not owned by New York City. You think he's not going to find a way around that? Really? You elected a weird shirtless dude in an apron rapper Nepo baby whose parents were open communists. What were you expecting? I love it. I really do. Now, furthermore, a little extra on the news side before we swing back in the radio crew. Something that I just enjoy. I wasn't going to play this kind of in the last segment, so I figured amid the inauguration stuff, I mentioned that Rosie O'Donnell is, no longer with us. She is in Ireland, though, and crying over RFK. And again, I don't know. I just think that going into the new year, it's important to start off right. Make sure that certain things matter.
When my child was diagnosed with autism when she was 2, and they're now 12, I knew that this was going to change the trajectory of my life in every way, and it has.
So far, totally fine. Nothing wrong with this.
And it's mostly beautiful ways, I have to say. And I'm very sick and upset about how autism gets represented in the media. I'm horrified by RFK Jr. and what he's saying and doing right now, and telling all these people these absurd conspiracy theories and implying that vaccines cause autism. And
so, as someone who did offer a little bit of caution going into Kennedy's administration, I will make the clear-cut case that so far, Kennedy has called for studies and reintroduced studies. And some of the studies are going in a more concerning fashion on the FDA side of things. Some of them are reiterating what it is that we'd previously believed. And yet, the imaginary, guilt fear-mongering here is the entire 2026 strategy. You're going to see it everywhere. Everywhere.
It's just ridiculous. It's been scientifically proven that it's genetic. And
not precisely. We're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Good evening, everybody.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Now, how is the media getting into 2026? I mean, here, things are pretty excellent. I got to say, well, this may have more to do with the Hoosier-Alabama game, but I'm in really great spirits. A lot of people seem to be in pretty great spirits so far in 2026, but there are a lot of people who have a lot of angst and anger and frustration and angstration at the moment, and it seems to be over on the media side of things. Right now, the ratings heading into the new year, the end of year December ratings for the major news outlets like MSNBC now, MS Now, or CNN, they are in the trash heap. And there are mutterings over at the TV network side of things that a lot of these big investment cable news programs are just not worth it. Bringing on people to simply regurgitate things that are days, weeks old, to be humiliated by independent journalists like Cam Higbee and Nick Shirley, Julio Rosas, it's really not doing them any favors. And you can see this everywhere. One of the places you see it most often is over on CNN on Abby Phillips' show at 9 p.m. Scott Jennings doing a phenomenal job. The way that the media is now being forced to respond to the fraud in Minnesota, Washington State, soon to be New York City, Ohio, etc. ad nauseum, is rather telling. This comes when people like Scott Jennings make the case that Tim Walz had clearly on the record called the fraud investigations white supremacy. Watch how they respond to this on the CNN crew.
It's Democrats who have put Somali diaspora in Minneapolis at the center of their party and their state's politics. It's a small portion of the population. There is a bunch of fraud that goes on. And even Tim Walz has claimed that any investigation of this fraud is akin to white supremacy,
no,
which is
he hasn't. No, he has not claimed that. He has not said that.
He has said that.
He has not said that.
I love that. He's never said that. Here's the clip.
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy. The idea of white supremacy. The idea of white supremacy.
Interesting stuff. Entertaining stuff, I will say. This is happening everywhere. Over on the Washington Post side of things, Josh Rogan went on media to announce that this Somali concern, this idea that people don't like the culture of the Somali angst and anger, all of that, that's really that all boils down to this severe xenophobia and racism, whatever. Here's that same tired narrative being trotted.
No one's for fraud. Everyone's against fraud. What's going on here is very clear. It's a targeting of the Somali and Somali American communities.
You can't say that everyone's against fraud here. First of all, because of the videos, like the Somali mother, who after she said fraud is bad, was so terrified and horror struck that she had said that in front of people on camera, she immediately stopped speaking. We're going to show another example here in a minute of just open death threats and also the acknowledgement of fraud and congratulation of fraud by Somalis to Somalis on social media. But we'll let him, get himself out here and say everything, get ahead of his skis.
That was directed by the President of the United States in public, on television, repeatedly. He called them garbage. He said they should go back to where they came from. And then all of a sudden, you've got the Treasury Secretary, HHS, DHS, the FBI, and, every MAGA YouTuber flooding the Somali community in what can obviously be known as a targeted attack on this community, which is, by the way, overwhelmingly the vast majority are American citizens.
Okay, so first of all, the idea that being a citizen of the United States absolves you of certain parts of your culture that you adhere to is kind of silly. Do I think that it should? Do I think that you should take on an American culture ethic? Again, a beautiful case here. The Cuban immigrants into the United States and a vast majority of legal immigrants from the Latin American and Central American spheres who have come into this country, very conservative, very family-oriented, deeply patriotic, especially those who have fled communist regimes. They adopted and they cling to the American culture, and then some of the micro-American cultures as well. I know, I lived with them when I was in Wisconsin in college. But when you have a group who comes into this country and then will still speak to themselves as a micro group, who will promise to still serve Somalia and still serve each other over any American. They don't see themselves as American. They see themselves as Somali. You have a significant issue. This brings us to Fardowsa Muhammad. Fardowsa Muhammad is actually someone who I know of. She is a private kind of charter KIPP school teacher. She teaches at the Frontier STEM High School. And she's also a KIPP Kansas City alum. Long story, a little bit shorter. When I ran Chalkboard Review, I had kind of a hit piece investigation on the KIPP schools. And although a charter private organization, they had become a funnel for left-wing DEI-funded racial measures into kind of the charter school space. And this is one of the individuals, one of the activists who came up. She is a famous Somalian Tik Toker. And she's made it very clear that she's extremely proud of her Somali brothers and sisters, though she be an American citizen. She's naturalized. You know, she's very proud of the fraud that's taken place.
Why is the Somali community under so much heat right now? Like, did I miss something? Hello?
Okay, let's hear her out. Let's hear her explanation. Why would the Somali community be under a lot of heat at the moment? Okay, so then she starts speaking Somali because she's addressing the people of Somalia. You don't just do that at your normal Chick-fil-A. You're like, hey, I have a number 2 and a like, you don't, no one does that. No.
Why problem? This is all low-key, red Minnesota. Why is that not always there? Why would you get caught? You scammed the government, cool.
Oh, why did you get caught? You scammed the government, cool. I'm endorsing, she says, this particular fraud. Why is the community getting so much heat? Because you find no problem with this. Because you endorse it. Because your issue is they got caught. Radio crew, we'll see you later. We'll see you Monday. In fact, it's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Sorry, I was running up against that radio clock there at the end. No, I really want you to hear her here. She really thinks it is hilarious. You wouldn't be in favor of this fraud. Her only criticism is that these people got caught and brought this shame onto the community, which is, again, that honor tactic style of culture.
Why? Oh my God, the F that don't get that period. Now the galas are turning on us and they're questioning the legitimacy of all Somali businesses. Now this is horrible.
Now they're turning on us. Now they're questioning the legitimacy of all Somali businesses. Well, yeah, because what we seem to find every time we turn over a rock around a Somali restaurant, a Somali daycare, a Somali medical facility, a Somali charity, a Somali grant application service, a Somali advisement center, a Somali campaign office, we find fraud, we find embezzlement, we find illegal activities. There seems to be something that is a cultural mainstay. I look at other immigrant communities in the United States, not all of these have this issue. You try to commit fraud in a Cuban community and you'll get your wrists chopped off by an angry abuelo. It won't end well for you.
PR for us, but it's first of all, it's cool when they do it. It's a problem when we do it.
No, it's not cool when anyone does it. And I say that as we recall at the very beginning of the show, one of the ladies who had her name on the particular 40 of the Somali daycares, she doesn't look Somali to me. Does she look Somali to you? Looking a little pasty. Looking a little bit like a girl who probably doesn't shut up about riding horses in middle school. That's what I'm, you know, kind of that vibe. You know what I'm saying? Got the middle part going on. Not looking very Somali. It appears it's not really cool when anyone's doing it, but it is not cool, especially when you're mad that you got caught.
Fuck. Red Minnesota, I'm really disappointed and I'm really sad and I'm really disgusted in what you guys did. Like that durten, I didn't know eat shaky. I didn't know what I'm eat jarin. I didn't joke high. Spelling mistakes
Excellent. Stellar. Super duper. Now, this was promptly called out by a lot of individuals because, you know, disgusting behavior. And Elon Musk was one of the guys, again, the guy who ran the Department of Government Efficiency, kind of hates fraud. It's really frustrating when there are those in the government saying that you're the problem because you've made money. You must have stolen it from people because you're very wealthy. And you see all of this fraud going on, probably pisses you off. I get it. Understand it. I agree. And so he comments on it. And then she does what any normal, not unhinged, hinged person would do, any sane person. And she's like issuing death threats. Again, they're just like you. Why would people be targeting the Somali community? Every single video addressing people in Somali, addressing the Somali community specifically.
And people say like this is fake. I'm like, actually, well, let's look at.
So she's playing Elon Musk's video where he, describes his displeasure with the fraud.
I wouldn't worry too much about this one. That's a bad piece of joy. I wouldn't worry too much about him. He about to die.
I wouldn't worry too much about him, about this Jew. Elon Musk is like white, Boer descendant, South African, not necessarily the most Jewish of lineages. But number two, he about to die soon. Well, that's a thing to say. And again, in this day and age, with this administration, with the culture now the way it is, where people are noticing these things, there is a common sense that the average American does in fact still retain, where they're not fooled. When you say, well, you're racist if you notice that all of the people speaking Somalian seem to act exactly like they did when they were in Somalia. How, that's really racist to notice that. You're getting that from, of course, the left, the Bernie Sanders kind of left. They're very mad. How could you notice? It's very ridiculous. Somebody get me my pudding. And then you have it over on the kind of paleo fake right, which we're going to get to in a couple of seconds here. But people started saying, hey, that's a death threat. That's wrong. And so now that she is, well, she's been identified and people are saying, man, Kip, you should probably can this fool. Now she wants to walk it back because it turns out actions have consequences. And as we have seen, political assassination is in fact something that is rather prevalent. So she tries to walk it back awkwardly. Here you go.
If you told me a week ago that my name and Elon Musk's name are being voiced in the same breath, I wouldn't believe you. But here I am today. Hello, if you know who I am.
I love it. Starting off strong. We've got like the timid voice. Hello, please, sir, can I have some more? I'm not sure if she's going to ask the shopkeeper if she can buy these shoes, but she might be on her way. But anywho, Sinlamabad Luhu over here, who's no more than 2, saying, if you had told me a week ago that my name and Elon Musk's name would be mentioned together, I would have said something in Somalian.
Do you know why this video has to be made?
She's looking off in the distance, which I also like. It's very, a little bit there.
On December 31st, 2025, my life took a tragic turn.
My life took a tragic turn. Exciting.
Was badly misinterpreted and misheard on a now viral clip.
I was badly misinterpreted and misheard. So, cool tip. You don't want to be misinterpreted, speak English. Just, kind of an exciting little tip there for you and yours over at home. Just, try it out. You and the kids, and exciting stuff. Misheard. No, you said it loud and clear. In fact, you were really smug. You're like, oh, he's going to be dead soon.
In this clip, my words and what they are being translated to has been taken greatly out of context. I want to make myself clear.
This, honest to God, this sounds as though she is trying out for a middle school play. And she is saying, the Grinch misheard me and he took the tree up the chimney and he took the last can of Who Hash.
I never intended or even aimed to threaten the life of Elon Musk.
Yeah, I trust you. Do you know why I trust you? Because you said, why did you get caught? And that was why you were upset in the very first video. You've already made it clear you have no issue with lying. So why should anyone believe you right now? Also, I'm going to, once again, this is the last time. I want to make this clear. There are a lot of people out there who seem to have the very stupid idea that you can share something on social media privately. Gang, it's called social media. Social media. You share it to the social media sphere. When you publish, see, there's another word. When you publish, when you post a video, a document, a song, an article, you are Martin Luther smacking up 95 theses. You are putting it in the town square. That is the point of social media. You don't want it to be public. You don't say it on social media. I have no sympathy, left, right, center. I do not care. If you make a post, you are putting it up for public consumption. I don't know, I'm just a nobody out there. You thought you can get out there and make comments on a large political issue. And so whomever, be they the most famous of famous people or the lowest of nobodies, has access to and can comment on your post. This is just the way it works. If you don't like this, instead of recording a video for the internet, write what you have to say on a Post-it note and stick it to your wall. You don't have to share it with the entirety of the world, but when you do, you put it up for public critique. And it can happen to anyone. It could happen to you. So no, I don't feel bad for anyone. I hear that some people on the right do this occasionally. Just a post and they took it. How could they go after me like that? You put it on social media. I cannot help but notice that some of the same people who told me to be very careful about the internet, stuff is there forever, you can't trust anybody, don't trust what you see on the internet, someone can take it and use it against you, all of a sudden take that and throw that 25 years into the future, and everyone's decided that those rules no longer apply. Common sense, ladies and gentlemen. No, you shouldn't feel bad for this person. Now, does that mean that she should be getting violent threats? No. No, she shouldn't. It's not an excuse for bad behavior. Should she be issuing death threats and little snark, squirrel noises? No, absolutely not. Incredible. What a time, in fact, to be alive. Now, there is a little bit more that I wanted to touch on with how all of this ties together with the Iranian situation, and then of course the Islamic honor culture behavior. There is a group that considers themselves over on the right, who there's not really a good term for it. The term alt-right's used too, broadly. The racially identitarian right, whatever you want to call them, the fractured group who thinks everything is about the Jews, has literally just lost their minds, more so than usual. On Steve Bannon's War Room, Kurt Mills, who is the editor over at the American Conservative magazine, has now decided to make the case that the reason Americans care about the Somali migrant fraud, you already know where I'm going with the end of the sentence, it's because of the Jews. It's Israel. The reason you would be mean to Muslims who adhere to this kind of honor culture system, because of the Jews. Yeah, that's really the secret here. No, he said this in an actual response. This is his real answer here. Check it out.
Somali things related, right? I mean, look, not to minimize it, but Israel is actually involved in the Somali thing. Israel has taken a side in the Somali civil war. They recognize Somaliland, and again, not to.
Oh, Israel siding with the not openly kill all of the Jews country. I wonder why they would do that.
To excuse that any of the fraud that is doubtless going on in some of these inner cities, but the reason
some of these inner cities,
why Somalia is so in the mainstream of sort of American media right now is
the reason why Somalia is in the mainstream of American media. It is not consistently again for about 2, 3, 4 days. The Somali fraud story from Nick Shirley did not touch CNN, The Washington Post, New York Times, MS Now, any of the major left-wing outlets, and the vast majority of the affiliate local networks and newspapers. Only now, with the left-wing side of the media trying to claim that either it's all conservatives' fault or it's way overblown or conservatives are really awful for questioning Somali culture. This argument, the reason that Somalia has been in, it's been in the news, all over the news, the mainstream news.
Excuse that any of the fraud that is doubtless going on in some of these inner cities, but the reason why Somalia is so in the mainstream of sort of American media right now is that I think, frankly, the Israeli lobby wants to push it.
That's it. I love it. Incredible. Oh, it's the Jews.
Oh, there's a big surprise.
Oh, incredible.
And it wants to radicalize people on this issue to distract from the larger macro issue.
The larger issue. Okay. The Jews want to distract you from the $18 billion in fraud. 1, 8, and a bleep ton of zeros. $18 billion in fraud, likely rampant in your state. We just haven't found it yet. Already has been found all throughout Minnesota, already all the way through Washington state. Zohran Mamdani is pushing this with the endorsement of Kathy Hochul in the largest city in the freaking country. It is found in Haitian community and Somali community groups in Ohio. It's also being looked into in Missouri, in Nebraska, in California, in Oregon, in Nevada, all the way from Vermont down to South Carolina. It is the biggest fraud scandal in the history of his country. You better have, I mean, he said there's a bigger macro issue. Kurt, you better have one knockdown, drag out of a, because Israel killed Santa Claus kind of, what's the actual thing here? Believe it or not, this would be a moment to use the Epstein excuse, because if you're going to go big, you might as well say, because they're trying to distract from Mecca Hitler, the super pedophile. Well, you know, they wouldn't actually disparage the name of Adolf Hitler, but we'll let Kurt try it. What's bigger than $18 billion in fraud so far? And probably the expulsion and arrest of a congresswoman and a very, as things go on, a good chance at an arrest of Governor Tim Walz.
Of the Israel lobby in the United States driving foreign policy on this discrete issue.
It's foreign policy, guys. It's foreign policy. They're trying to distract you from foreign policy. What foreign policy? What are they trying to hide?
And when I say discrete, it's this specific issue, Iran. But
Iran. Israel's never talked about Iran before, guys. In fact, Israel doesn't want the United States to notice Iran. That's why when Netanyahu was over here in Florida, Trump wouldn't shut up about Iran because Israel didn't want everyone to talk about it. So simultaneously, Netanyahu has Trump's cojones in a vice and doesn't want him to talk about Iran, but also Trump gets out there and says, you know what? I'm going to talk about Iran. Bibi said don't talk about it. He's probably frowning. And the man was nodding along. Oh, yes, that's it. Yes, Israel is trying to hide that they don't like the Iranian regime. Incredible. More at 11. American Conservative Magazine, ladies and gentlemen. Kurt Mills with his head so far up his own ass he can taste his small intestine.
I think if they get what they want on Iran, they're gonna widen it. They're gonna widen it to Turkey.
Oh, they're gonna widen it. It's Greater Israel. Oh, that's the conspiracy. Israel, who hasn't even gone into the West Bank yet, is going into Iran. Yeah, they're gonna they'll plop down a bagel joint outside Tehran. Oh, we got them. There it is. That's some masterful analysis. And the reason I'm being so hard on Kurt in this, other than the fact that he's a blooming idiot, is that my job as national correspondent, I'm brought on to shows, including with an invitation to Bannon's War Room before, which I have absolutely turned down and will continue to turn down, because it takes a bare minimum level of research, even on things that I may not personally agree with. You don't have to believe or go along with everything that the Israeli government does. Absolutely not. When I was last over in Israel, I got in a pretty big knockdown, drag-out argument on camera with the Israeli Foreign Ministry and two of their most famous journalists. Because I said, you guys are part of the reason this crap keeps happening on the media level. I have no problem criticizing Israel, but when you have lowered yourself to believe everything is secretly the Jews, you deserve to be made fun of. Because it's just like the left claiming that everything is the billionaires. Oh, the billionaires. Oh, the billionaire. Now you have people over on the right, for example, like Lauren Chen, who are running out to going, well, actually, guys, collectivism can be good. It can actually be really good. Individualism is really sometimes bad. If you don't know what individualism and collectivism are, and what foreign policy is, and how governments work, and how certain religions function, and videos where people are openly telling you they will kill you, they will steal your stuff, they will rape your family, they will set up hell where you are, and you don't believe them because, well, this Reddit post that had about 3 pixels said the Torah, ooh. You need to stop. Put the phone down, go touch grass, please. For the sake of those who know you personally.
They might even widen it to Saudi, the way that you hear people talking about the region these days, and it will never really stop. And I think
it'll never stop. Yes. I love this argument so much. I do. I love this. The argument that is being made, Israel's not going to stop expanding its borders, okay? So the Jews who have secretly been in control of everything for thousands of years, they've never taken over the world before officially, but now all of a sudden 2026 is here, and if you spell 2026 backwards, it doesn't mean anything. But when I put on my aluminum foil, I start seeing menorahs everywhere. And is that a dreidel? Oh no!
The idea that this is separate from the process that went on in the global war on terror, the process that Donald Trump won the presidency, rejecting in 2016 and again in 2024. The idea that this is separate, I think, is pretty laughable.
The idea that Americans mad at the Somali migrant fraud and the Israeli plot in Iran, supposedly, that those are separate issues. That's laughable. That's laughable. My dude, we got to get you some Seinfeld or some Frasier or something. You're laughing at the wrong stuff, Chief.
Netanyahu's had a long career. He's been the most important Israeli politician since the death of the founding generation in Israel. And his greater project has been remaking the Middle East with American force of arms.
I used to read American Conservative magazine. I'm embarrassed to admit that on the air. My goodness. The moral of the story is, first of all, read. Number two, when someone tells you stupid things, you don't have to go, oh, maybe he has a point there. Absolutely not. And most importantly, whether they're on the left or the right, people going into 2026 with the belief, with the deeply held idea that, well, I mean, you know, we're just going to let Americans suckle from the garbage we spoon onto their plate and their common sense won't pick it up. Bad move. Bad move. Do not treat your audience, do not treat people who are paying attention to your social media as driveling, sniveling monkeys. That is a stupid decision. That is dumb, and it will bite you in the butt. Now, on to a little bit of mail time, because I think, you know, a little bit of, you know, fun here at the end of the show, just for kicks and giggles. Something, if you have a question for mail time, every show's got to have a mail segment, that kind of a thing. If you do have a question for mail time, you can throw that over in the live stream chat. You can throw it over in the Discord, which there is a link to over on in the description of the video. And then I think you can actually go to tonykinnett.com if you're that sort who just deeply enjoys that kind of a thing, and you can send a question there through email. So that said, let's get into some of the mail time questions. Oh, right off the bat, an excellent one. How do people go from covering real things to going to the conspiracy theory so quickly? Really, really good question. Really good question. For the example here, I actually do have a tweet. I didn't actually get to share these, but now you've saved me from not having to show these on air. So take, for example, James Lee. James Lee is a pseudo right-wing influencer guy. When the Nick Shirley investigation dropped on the Somali fraud, he got out with a tweet and said, hey, everyone, pick up a camera, do this in the city that you live in. 2026 is the year we end the nonprofit grift. Cool. Encouraging independent journalism, people paying attention, awesome. A couple of days later, the Israeli media is now reporting the Mossad were the first to uncover the Somalian daycare fraud in Minnesota. Coincidentally, Israel just recognized Somaliland, with plans to build a new military base and relocate Palestinians there. Nick Shirley is 100% fed slop. Wow. So how do you go from like pretty normal, like encouragement style engagement bait to whatever this garbage is? No, I'm going to tell you, because I run a larger account on social media that is a part of some of the DM groups and some of the back networks where they encourage these things. It's all about what's going to drive the most clicks. That's all it's about. Right when something is happening, you get out there and encourage something in different words that someone else has already encouraged. You say, yeah, everyone should do this. It's really great. Hashtag MAGA, hashtag America First, hashtag yes. And you get that out there and you get your clicks, because everyone's amplifying the, hey, you need to do this too stuff at the moment, because everyone's really emotionally involved. Well, after a couple of days, that's not good enough for people, because they want to know more. And so they go to the content experts, those who devote their time and study to that specific issue. For example, when there are major court cases, you will often hear me cite, for example, Margot Cleveland over at The Federalist, who is a phenomenal legal analyst on the judicial system. You'll hear me cite her because after the initial shock and the awe, then, for example, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals story from earlier on in the show, if I wanted more analysis on it, I would cite you hers. Because now we moved on for the general commentary. I didn't go to law school. My specialty is in education and pattern psychology, and the sciences, so not law. I would then cite her work. Well, that's really bad for a lot of influencers who have never read anything and also refuse to give credit to anyone. So what do? Instead, then they go to the conspiracy land, because you reach a point in broadcasting. I'll never forget it. I was guest hosting for Hammer and Nigel on 93 WIBC in Indianapolis. It was the second day in a row I'd guest hosted. The first day was great. All of the stuff I'd always wanted to say, I thought I could say on the air, went really well. I got all of the kicks in, all the licks in. And then the second day hit, we were about 15 minutes into the show, and I realized, crap, I have now said about every single thing that I've ever said in like private passing conversation in politics that's relevant to this. Oh no. And you can do one of two things at that moment. You can either read and learn more things and follow giants whom you then cite appropriately and stand on their shoulders, or you regurgitate. There are a lot of hosts out there, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, the entire American Conservative magazine staff, apparently, a lot of influencers that you might know, James Lee's one of them, they just regurgitate. They see whatever is trending, or they kind of spin some just asking questions thing to drive engagement because they want your clicks. Isn't it interesting how? And there's nothing that actually fits there that works. But they're just asking questions. Isn't it interesting? Ooh. And Americans have largely grown tired of this. This is an actual deep concern. I was invited to an influencer summit, which I just want to let you know, about half of all influencers, even on the conservative side, they are just as awful as you picture them to be as influencers. I will never forget sitting at this influencer summit and telling some of them the question of swatting was brought up 2 years ago, right before the 2024 election. And I remember hearing one of the ladies, you would know her, I'm not going to say her name out of kindness here. When the question of swatting came up, she said, just ignore those comments and messages. That doesn't mean anything. And I said, no, you should absolutely report any threats, any serious, swatting suggestion, threat stuff to your law enforcement immediately. And half of them looked at me like I was crazy. No, lo and behold, about half of those people would end up getting swatted over the next year. So a lot of the empty-headed influencers, they just regurgitate. Why? Because it drives clicks. It's easier. Now, is the content and the quality very good? No. You're going to have slower news days. It's a private gripe that I have that even a lot of accounts and friends of mine in the space that I think do some good journalism feel the desperate need all the time to treat any piece of news as though it is the end of the world. President Trump just said he's mad. Breaking, developing. Whoa, President Trump just said he's thinking about something. Okay, calm down, Steve. You don't have to go all in right now. Hang on. It'll be okay. That's kind of the thing there. Sorry, you did touch on a bit of a nerve. So that aside, a couple other mail time questions before we round out today. Tony, what would happen if Trump starts ignoring judges? This is from David and Johan Sanford. The Supreme Court ruled against the judges. They're on Trump's side in that situation. It depends on what the case is. So if the president of the United States starts ignoring federal orders, you run into the actual constitutional crisis, because then the federal judicial laws, federal judicial rulings have implications for both state and federal government. And so then you could see a situation where someone like Gavin Newsom tries to uphold that law, and the federal government under the Trump administration ignores that particular ruling. And so what do you then have? Do you have like a standoff, and it would go to the Supreme Court? You'd likely have an emergency motion that's filed. But it depends on the type of case. Some things where the Supreme Court or an appellate court or even a federal judge has ruled one way or the other, they're very case specific. And some judge on the other side of things could argue, well, actually, I meant this. Now, do I think we're rapidly approaching there and that we're going to need to approach there at some point? Yes, but it's a Pandora's box situation. You know, once it's open, it's open. Question from David. In Russia, communism is a dead dog, but in the West, it's roaring like a lion. Why? Are Americans that effing stupid? So in Russia, yeah, they've given up communism for fascism. The Russian economy is absolutely fascist, 100%. The state economy has alluded to this pretty openly. I mean, they've just swapped one authoritarianism for another. Russia has shut down many of the like cultural and Christian related centers that aren't like part of the weird kind of Russian orthodoxy. They're imposing a lot of the same things in the murdering of opponents in a lot of fascist government. I'm talking about Germany, not necessarily, but like a lot of fascist governments that have been around. So they still have collectivism. Absolutely. But also the economy is no longer big enough or cohesive enough to effectuate a large scale centralized economic system. So it's kind of like an oligarchical nightmare wrapped in fascism. That's kind of the Russian economy now. Why is communism thriving in the West? Well, it's not thriving politically. It's doing terribly. Why is it thriving socially? Because good men create good times. Good times create weak men. So you have an entire generation of weak men who are seeking after endless hedonism and pleasure, and that brings about communism. An endless pursuit of stoicism often brings about fascism. This fun fact for you on the philosophical side of things. From XLH, verifying and auditing the federal funds that are spent on programs is long overdue. Why wasn't this going on all along? Where are the adults in government? So they did originally try to do this with Doge. And then the Senate didn't get its stuff together to actually get some of those confirmations across the finish line. To be clear with you, John Thune should have allowed Trump to do some recess appointments and then appointed Elon Musk. Absolutely should have been done. It wasn't done. It was a bad decision. This idea that, well, we don't really need to do recess appointments. We don't really need to do, well, now it's 2026 and we're still fighting through getting people confirmed. It was a bad choice on Senate leadership. I love a lot of things about Thune's leadership. He made an error there. Why haven't we been doing this all along? Because things that grow really slowly, you often don't think about oversight for. I mean, when a company grows, they often add human resources as a department, which, a bad example, but like an accounting and auditing department is often added as an afterthought after it's way too big for that now to be coming into play. People don't, as things gradually grow, and the federal government has gradually become a big, sweltering, disgusting financial beast. You know, there are auditing agencies, but adding actual accountability measures, it's been taken over by legal speak, and everything is a bureaucratic process that takes 8 forms to this place and then 13 forms to that place, and then you wait 2 weeks. And so a lot of the measures are there. They just take forever, or they're inept, or they just don't have any teeth. From Ruth Marshall, why haven't any of Trump's sons joined the military? Well, I mean, I can't speak for his older sons. As for Barron, I think he once said that he was considering it. I don't want the military to be a compulsory thing. It should be a voluntary thing. Getting into my thoughts on why you should or shouldn't join the military would be too long a question. I might talk about that another time, or in the Discord or something. But long and short, I'm not bothered by them not joining the military. I don't think you should not have to have served in the military to have an opinion on foreign policy. That's stupid. You're a citizen. You should have an opinion on whatever you want to have an opinion on, and then argue it. The idea that if you haven't served in the military, you get to have no opinion on the military or foreign policy is ridiculous. That's not a marker of service. Now, there are reasons that military service is a great marker of a citizen. Absolutely. Again, that gets into the kind of my ethos on what I think that citizenship and then residential status matters. A lot of it comes down to Robert Heinlein, believe it or not. So why is, from Rose, why is the young Somali lady from KIP, Miss Mahmoud, not being arrested for threatening Elon Musk? Well, because if you want to get into the technical legal parlance, she didn't threaten him. She said, you're not going to have to worry. He's going to be dead soon. You can make any lawyer argument to get your way out of there. I mean, you actually do need to have some pretty sticky, like, private messages, something that's like really clear. Now, someone probably did reach out and talk to her. That happens. She's not required to reach out and say, hey, the FBI talked to me today. But she didn't. I mean, is it clear that's what she was implying? Well, yeah. I mean, to those out there who read the connotative language, absolutely. But the denotative language, which legal rulings and law enforcement rely on, no, you can worm your way out of that. That's why she hasn't been arrested. From Megaflash, when will these judges finally get what's coming to them? I don't know what you mean by what's coming to them. I'll tell you what I think should happen regarding judges. I think that we should scrap about 80% of federal agencies, and the vast majority of federal, local, and state legal rulings, especially including civil lawsuits and the ease of getting into lawsuits, should be scrapped. Like the last 100 years of, I'd say 80% of the legal precedent needs to be scrapped. What has crippled the United States? The idea that if you get really pissy, you can sue someone for anything at any time. That's like pathetic. It's just as pathetic as when men dueled for everything and we lost a bunch of men in our military, or in the French military, as they suffered with because people were just killing themselves. Right now, the nation is literally stuck its legal system into molasses because anyone can sue anyone for anything. I'm going to sue you. No, you do need some people in charge to actually do in charge things. And there's a balance there. Right now, again, the real issue is complete and total universal sovereignty. That everyone is a citizen no matter what, and that means that you are fundamentally wielding the power of the state, even though you may not want to or have the ability to. So this from Vic Ferrari, good friend, a long time of the show. He said, TK, let's say you have the opportunity to take over. What do you do? If you mean like take over as in named king, or like if I was the president of the United States, what is the very first thing I would do? If I was the president, I would pull the United States out of the UN immediately. I would just pull the United States out of the UN just immediately. The second thing I would do is I would direct the Secretary of State to begin reconquering Panama completely as a U.S. asset, wholeheartedly. The third thing I would do is reevaluate the United States relationship with the Federal Reserve. But as a president, you're really bound by executive authority. So if we're going to talk about the magic wand, you're in charge. Let's say that I was named, the king of Indiana or something like that. Well, the very first thing I do is I put Gary, Indiana under martial law. The second thing that I would do realistically in charge, the denaturalization process needs to be made clearer, and it needs to happen much faster. So does the congressional ability and authority to enforce law. I mean, the state legislatures should have more power. They should be electing senators again. The 17th needs to be repealed immediately. The idea that senators are just like House of Representatives individuals, but bigger, is not what that was supposed to be. It's hard to think of a list of things that you would do immediately as an individual. And this is the reason I say this. If there is one thing and one thing only that I have learned throughout this entire process of doing this since I've started doing this thing full time, it's a marathon. But the American people want quick fixes. We want quick fixes. That's what we want. We want it now. We want it as soon as I click order. We want it as soon as the person is in the office. It's day 2. Why isn't Pam Bond? That kind of thing is something that Americans are hooked on. Instant gratification. That's not the political system. That's not how you build a culture. That's not how you maintain a culture. And that's not how you get a culture back. A revivification of American culture, it does in fact start with identifying a specific culture. Now, unfortunately, there are people who have no idea what that culture should be. You have a group of the Republican Party who think it's all economics, and all it is, there are like very vague words that are said, like while a commercial is playing. Liberty, justice, and an American hamburger. New at Hardee's. Like, no, I think that it's more than that. And then you also have some of the more populist crew that think that it boils down to color, and they're idiots as well. So what does that mean? Well, the actual American pioneering ethos culture, I was in a podcast with Gabriella Hoffman, maybe. No, not Hoffman. Oh, I'm going to kick myself. It'll be 2 a.m. and I won't be able to remember. Oh, her last name's like, it's not Jasinski. Anywho, there's a friend of mine over on the Fox News side of things who had me on her podcast and asked what my biggest concern is for the United States over the next 10 years. And it's that Americans deciding what it actually means to be an American. That's a huge question. Because what really needs to happen, honestly, is that this country needs revival. I mean, it needs Jesus Christ. Very, very muchly so. There are a lot of people right now who are focused on everything but themselves and their families, and who are kind of suckered away into the panem et circenses, like the idea that everything revolves around getting the next meal and being entertained. And that's a problem, because that doesn't satisfy. Also, the American public right now has nowhere to go. We're not moving towards something. The American people are a pioneering people. The best years for this country have always been when there has been a place to go. We are beating the communists. We are going to the moon. We are manifesting destiny. And by the way, Americans understood that, because after we reached the coasts, the American people were like, crap, we got to find some more places to spread and grow, because any country that stops spreading and growing dies. Any country that self-regulates and is like, we're going to sit in our borders, gets conquered by like next Tuesday. You don't believe me? I mean, tell me, how's the Empire of Portugal doing? How's the Empire of Spain doing? How's the Empire of the United Kingdom doing? When the United States reached an empire status of growing and assimilating and moving and creating and bringing liberty and pioneering, it's a very Abrahamic country. You go into a land that I will show you. Take your family, go and move. Now no one's moving. I can't remember the interview this was on, but Ben Shapiro actually talked about this far more eloquently than I did lately. The idea of that Americans aren't moving anymore. They're not actually going and moving as young adults into a brand new area. They're kind of staying where they are, and they think they're entitled for everything to be perfect and wonderful where they are. And that's not what this country was founded to be. This isn't supposed to be a place where you're like, my ancestors were here in 1202, and these are the same rocks that they had. No, it's supposed to be go and do. If America doesn't have anywhere to go and grow to, then it's not going to do so. Okay, last thing here. This is from Mark. Oh, and it's super chat, $5. Very nice of you, Mark. He said, I think everyone should do at least 2 years of government service. The military is only one of the options. The park service, police, fire, elected office, etc. I'm gonna shape that a little differently. This is the culmination of the Heinlein from the book, not the movie, Starship Troopers, and the core of my political philosophy for citizenship. I think that everyone should have the opportunity to gain citizenship by some kind of government federal service. And you're right, it shouldn't be limited to the military, but it should require them to put their life on the line in some way. They must demonstrate in service, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, I would suggest 5 years. They must demonstrate that they are willing to put the whole of the country, the state, ahead of themselves. They must show they're willing to give their life for their people. Then they get citizenship. And they shouldn't be able to have citizenship while they're in the service. Once they have completed their term, again, doesn't have to be the military. Again, Heinlein Starship Troopers makes this clear because it saves you from conscript syndrome. You cannot force someone to take civic responsibility who doesn't want it. Ask a Frenchman or an Austro-Hungarian or a Russian how that went in World War I. Very, very poorly. Conscription makes for horrible soldiers. Do you really want someone next to you in the foxhole who's forced to be there? If you're in a fight, really? You need them to provide covering fire as you advance? Your very life is held on the idea they will get up and they will fire to keep the enemies in front of you, their heads down. You want that person to be dragged there who hates being there, who doesn't want to be there? Some 18-year-old who's pissed off from New York? That's who you want in the foxhole next to you? No. It should be optional, but citizenship should be the prize. Now, unfortunately, in the 90s, the idea for the Starship Troopers movie was that's a parody of fascism. Oh, service guarantees citizenship. Would you like to know more? I mean, that's where that meme comes from. No, I don't think first of all, that's not a fascism idea. But, that's a political party idea. That's an ideological idea. I don't think so. But I think that demonstrating your willingness to serve is a goal for citizenship. Now, again, it's a little too late, it being 10 minutes over where we always cut off, to go into this. Oh my goodness, a lot of super chats coming in that I was not expecting. You guys do not have to give super chats to the show, by the way. You don't have to do that. You don't have to join for channel memberships. We don't ask you to do that. It's very kind of you who do tip and do so, but I just want to make sure that you don't think that you have to do that. All right, I will address a couple of these super chats. So Kevin gave another $5, just incredibly kind of you. Winter said, very good point, Tonus. That's, again, very, very kind of you. Oh, congrats on 6 months as a member. We love Winter. She's a great pal over on the Discord. And then from Irma, 10 euros. Ooh, thank you. That's very kind of you. God bless you over in Eurostan. Extremely important is a mandatory voter ID to bring legitimacy to a voting system. Without it, opposition finds a way to corrupt the system. The world is invaded, and she's watching from overseas. Well, yeah, you would absolutely know more than just about anybody. Verification for every federal dollar should have happened immediately. You want to say where I would have suggested the Trump administration defy federal judges? It should have been there. That's where. Day 2 of an office, every federal dollar frozen unless you can prove where every recipient is, that it is a citizen of the United States via specific ID and certification. Absolutely. But that would have caused a lot of disruption. I would have rather had disruption there than I would have in the economy on the tariff thing. Sorry. There was going to be some pain before the gain. I would have rather have seen all of it stop before it's verified. Then we can look at who's actually getting the most welfare and why, and what kinds, and what should and shouldn't be subsidized. Not this idea that, well, I think I deserve $1,400 a week for childcare. Yeah, don't we all? All right, I think that's enough yapping from me for the week. So I just want to say, first and foremost, I really appreciate y'all. I think you're fantastic. Oh, to Cliff Victoria, Tony, you have a Venmo. You know how big a percentage YouTube gets from super chats. That is true. If you go over to dailysignal.com, dailysignal.com, we actually have a donation link over there if you're desperate to give money. They have a donation link over there that lets you donate to the Daily Signal nonprofit, and we get 100% of that. And I believe you get to use it as a tax write-off. I don't know how that works. But if you do go to dailysignal.com and make a donation, again, I'm not asking you to, I'm just saying, because we got the question from Victoria, she's a YouTube channel member, make that clear, I'm not trying to be a carpetbagger. If you go over there, that's probably the best way to do it. You should say that you were watching the Tony Kinnett cast when you did it, because then my boss will think I'm really cool. Again, whether or not, I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend with your family. Hope you have an excellent New Year's. I would implore you to pick up a copy of God's Word and go to church. I have a new devotional as well. No one asked me a question about this. It's the Charles Spurgeon Evening and Morning, and it's really, really good so far. Highly, highly recommend. Stellar stuff. All right. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.